Okay, so this is my symposium project. My question is, how does knowing myself in my own community help me think about what it means to be a community-focused educator? Even though I wasn't able to apply what I've learned in the classroom or what I've learned this semester into a classroom, I was able to expand on what I did know. I've never been very community-focused, and this class has had me reflect on what that means. For that reason, the inquiry question really resonated with me because it's given me a foundation of what it means to be quote unquote a good teacher and active in my community. Overall, I took this opportunity to reflect on what I've learned so far throughout this semester and how it could be applicable to a classroom. So these questions helped guide my learning on how to be a community-focused educator. Essentially, I just broke apart the inquiry question and analyzed it in different sections. So the first one, what does community mean to me? What does it mean to be a good teacher? How does knowing myself in my own community mean? And how do I apply this to a classroom? Um, so I think my personal definition of community is important in this inquiry question. We had a long class discussion about what community means to me. Um, I was able to define community as a group that unifies and interacts over a shared interest, but applying that into a classroom, I want more than just unifying over learning a subject. I want students to feel comfortable in the class and enjoy being part of my learning community. So, in order for them to feel comfortable in my class, I have to go above and beyond as a teacher. So, what does it mean to be a good teacher? Using our podcast from our social connections assignments, I wanted to address ways on how students can feel comfortable in class. The first podcast I listened to, Eight Black Hands, episode 73, Smart Black Kids versus Acting White. This podcast discusses how students feel in their community, and the topic that was brought up was addressing uncomfortable situations and discussions in the classroom. Rachel, one of the people that they were interviewing, talked about how she was one of the only people of color in her class. And when it comes to history lessons, the room feels uncomfortable. And instead of the teacher addressing racism in the past and in the current now, they just kind of skirt around the topic and don't really say anything. And Rachel had said during the podcast that she would prefer to have an open conversation about it because not addressing these conversations are even more uncomfortable. And then going past the students and expanding community to include parents as well. Nice White Parents, the Book of Statuses. In this podcast, a new white family enrolled their children into a Title I school and wanted to fundraise for newer school resources. Instead of the parents participating in the PTA, they completely steamrolled the original parents and just wanted to do what they wanted. This left the original parents feeling left out to participate in their child's education. So, understanding my community means knowing when I need to take a step back and listen and be there for support rather than being the voice. Um, and then continuing, what does it mean to be a good teacher? Acknowledging the difference in backgrounds. One major takeaway from this year is the difference in backgrounds and the importance of flexibility as a teacher. There's a quote that I really liked from Gorski. Privilege begets privilege. It is also one reason why merit programs are flawed. They fail to account for the difference between teaching privileged students in well-resourced schools where parents might pool resources and pay to hire additional teachers or two, where they can afford tutors and academic camps and iPads full of education programs for their children. The truth is, most of us know to at least some extent that the system is rigged and the odds are stacked against the most economically vulnerable families, not because they don't work hard, but because access and opportunity are not distributed fairly. That's one of the major things that I've learned this year is just the difference in backgrounds and how some children might not have parents to go home to help with their lesson, and that creating harsh deadlines for students isn't helping them at all, and that as a teacher I need to build as much support as I can for them. And that means just acknowledging the unequal access to opportunities. And even though there might be evenly distributed tools and assistance, those kids might not benefit off of that. And we'll never get to the part where justice fixing the system to offer the best that I can do is equity. So, what does knowing myself within the community mean? I really liked this quote. If I'm willing to look in the mirror and not run from what I see, I have a chance to gain self knowledge, and knowing myself is as crucial to good teaching as knowing my students and my subjects. This is from Palmer, Heart of a Teacher. Self-reflection is so important to being a teacher, especially a community-focused one. Whether reflecting on past or wrong behavior, you're setting an example for students, and that growth is not required for education, and that's just simply untrue. Self-knowledge goes hand in hand with learning new information because it shows you're processing the information and not just taking it surface level value. Knowledge requires depth, and you have to be willing to grow from that, and that means admitting when you're wrong and being open to new way of trying things. So, what did I learn? I really liked this quote as well from Heart of a Good Teacher. Good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from identity and integrity of the teacher. Um, because it just goes past reading lessons to students. You have to be there more emotionally and supportive for them. So, what did I learn? I think acknowledging and understanding the differences in community is the main takeaway that I've learned from this. Knowing my privilege and my background and how that benefited me, and how some of these students don't have the same background as me. Creating a comfortable space in the classroom is incredibly important, especially for students to feel comfortable. You have to have uncomfortable conversations, and then understanding the value that the community holds, understanding that these students have different support systems outside of the classroom as well, and they might not, and that I might be the only support system for them. And then being flexible with students, there's no definitive lesson or anything like that. So, what are my next steps? How can I continue to research these topics? Just being up to date, and being a teacher, that means that you have to be willing to continue to learn. You're never done learning. How do I feel more comfortable with uncomfortable conversations? That's another thing that I kind of got used to this semester, but I want to continue that. I get really used to being in my own comfort zone, and I need to start stepping out of that and addressing those things. And then how can I be vulnerable in the classroom? I think it's important to be vulnerable, because if you're not vulnerable, the students aren't going to be vulnerable. These are my sources.